In the spring of 1992, a studio executive slid a check across a conference table toward Clint Eastwood. $20 million. All Clint had to do was change the ending of Unforgiven. He picked up the check, looked at it for a moment, then slid it back. And what happened in the weeks that followed became one of the most talked about moments in the history of Hollywood contract negotiations, not because of the money, but because of what the refusal revealed about the man who made it. It was March 1992. Unforgiven was in post-production. Warner Brothers had seen a rough cut of the film, and the response in the screening room had been complicated in the specific way that truly original work tends to be complicated when shown to people whose job is to predict how a mass audience will receive it. The film was extraordinary. Everyone in that screening room agreed on that. The performances were powerful, the direction masterful, the script intelligent and morally serious in ways that American studio films rarely manage to be. Gene Hackman had delivered what many in the room privately believed was the finest work of his career. The production design, the cinematography, the score, every element was exactly right. The people who had seen that rough cut knew, with the specific certainty of industry professionals who have seen hundreds of films and know the real thing when it appears in front of them, that they were watching something important. They also knew they were watching something that ended in a way that was going to be deeply uncomfortable for a significant portion of the paying audience. The ending of Unforgiven is not a happy one. It is not the ending of a conventional Western where the hero wins and order is restored and the audience goes home satisfied. It is the ending of a film about what violence actually costs, which means the cost is paid in full, on screen, without softening, without the redemptive final frame that tells the audience it is okay to feel good about what they just watched. William Munny rides away into the darkness, not triumphant, not redeemed, just gone, carrying everything he has done into a future the film deliberately refuses to illuminate. The studio's research team had shown the rough cut to test audiences in 3 cities. The numbers came back within a week, and they told a story that studio executives understood very well. A significant percentage of test viewers had responded negatively to the ending. They found it bleak, unsatisfying. Some used the word depressing. They had come expecting the satisfactions of a Western, the resolution of conflict, the establishment of a new order. The heroes earned peace, and they had not received any of those things. The research projected that a different ending, something that offered even a small gesture toward conventional resolution, a hint of peace, a suggestion that William Munny had earned something meaningful through his final violent actions, could increase the film's commercial performance by a measurable and significant margin. The studio's modelers were conservative in their projections. Even the conservative numbers were striking. The studio had done the math. A different ending could mean tens of millions of additional dollars at the box office. And so the executive had prepared the check, $20 million paid directly to Clint Eastwood, in addition to his existing compensation, in exchange for reshooting the final sequence with an ending that tested better with audiences. The meeting was held at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, the same building, in fact, where 2 years later, a different executive would sit across a different mahogany table and tell Clint he was no longer bankable. The same kind of corporate conference room, long table, leather chairs, one window with blinds half drawn, the particular atmosphere of a place where large amounts of money change hands and careers are made and unmade with the stroke of a pen and the careful language of men who have learned to make the inevitable sound like an opportunity. Clint arrived alone. He sat down. The executive, a man named Thomas Barrett, who had been at Warner Brothers for 15 years and had negotiated some of the largest talent deals in the studio's history, presented the offer with the careful, practiced professionalism of someone who had learned that the best way to deliver a difficult proposition was to make it seem inevitable. The research was presented first: 40 pages of data, audience responses, demographic breakdowns, projected box office models under multiple scenarios. Barrett walked Clint through the numbers with the patience of a man who understood that the data was his strongest argument and wanted to give it time to work. Then the check, $20 million. Barrett explained the terms: a reshoot of the final sequence, 3 days of production. The existing ending replaced with one that had been drafted by the studio's script consultants, something that preserved the film's darkness while offering the audience a clearer sense of closure, something that tested at significantly higher approval ratings in every demographic the studio cared about. Clint looked at the check for a long moment. Then he looked at the data. Then he looked at Barrett. "Who wrote the new ending?" he asked. Barrett named the studio's script consultants. "Have they read the script?" Clint asked. Barrett assured him they had. "Have they understood it?" Clint said quietly. Barrett paused. "The ending is the point," Clint said. He wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't performing anything for the room. He was simply saying something he had been thinking about for years, something he had understood before the first day of shooting and had built the entire film around. William Munny rides into the dark because that's what the film is about. Not the killing, not the money. The impossibility of doing what he did and coming back clean. If he rides into the light, if there's resolution, if the audience gets to feel okay about what they watched, then the film is a lie. And I didn't spend 2 years making a lie. Barrett had been in this business long enough to recognize the difference between negotiating posture and genuine conviction. He had sat across this table from some of the most celebrated directors in Hollywood and had heard all of them say, at one point or another, that there were things they would never compromise. He had watched most of them find a way to compromise when the number was right. The conviction was always real. The ceiling was always there. $20 million was a very large number. In 15 years, Barrett had never seen a ceiling that $20 million could not reach. He had expected this one to be no different. "The number can be adjusted," Barrett said carefully. "If 20 isn't, it's not about the number," Clint said. Barrett looked at him. "It could be 200 million, Clint said. The ending stays." He pushed the check back across the table. Barrett sat for a moment. He was a man who had built his career on finding the terms on which any deal could be made, on understanding that everyone had a price, that every conviction had a ceiling, that the job of a studio negotiator was to find that ceiling and meet it. He had never, in 15 years, encountered a ceiling he could not eventually reach. He was beginning to understand that this was going to be different. "Clint," Barrett said, shifting to first names in the way that experienced negotiators do when they want to change the temperature of a conversation, "I want to be honest with you. The research is very clear. We're talking about a meaningful difference in the film's commercial performance. We're talking about the difference between a successful film and a phenomenon. We're talking about what this does for your next project, for your leverage here, for everything that comes after." Clint looked at him with the particular patience of a man who has heard every version of this argument from studio executives and producers and distributors and test screening coordinators and marketing consultants, and has found all of them every single time insufficient. "I know what you're saying," Clint said, "and I understand the numbers. But the numbers are measuring the wrong thing. They're measuring whether people feel comfortable at the end. I'm not trying to make people comfortable. I'm trying to make people think. Those are different projects. He paused. If Munny rides into the light, the audience walks out thinking about something else. They walk out thinking about the adventure they just had. If Munny rides into the dark, they walk out thinking about themselves, about the violence they cheered for 2 hours earlier and what it cost. That's the film. That's the only version of this film that does what the film is trying to do. Barrett made one more attempt. He described the studio's commitment to the film, the marketing plans already in place, the awards campaign being prepared. He described how a stronger commercial performance would give Clint more creative freedom on future projects, more leverage in future negotiations, more ability to make the films he wanted to make on the terms he wanted to make them. Clint listened to all of it. When Barrett finished, he nodded once, the nod of a man acknowledging that he has heard something, not that he has been persuaded by it. Thomas, he said, I appreciate everything you've said. I understand what you're offering and why you're offering it. But I've been in this business for 40 years, and I've learned one thing above everything else. He stood up. The films that last are the ones that told the truth, not the ones that tested well, not the ones that made the most money in their opening weekend, the ones that said something true, even when the truth was hard, especially when the truth was hard. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. Unforgiven tells the truth about what violence costs. I'm not changing that. Not for 20 million. Not for any number. He left. Thomas Barrett sat in the conference room for a long time after Clint was gone. The check was still on the table. The 40 pages of research data were still spread out in front of him. The box office projections for the alternate ending were still showing the same numbers they had shown an hour ago. None of it felt like it meant what it had meant before the conversation. Barrett had spent 15 years learning to read rooms and read people. And he was reading this one now, this empty room with its mahogany table and its half-drawn blinds and its check that had not been accepted. And what he was reading felt unfamiliar. He was used to winning negotiations. He was used to being the person who found the terms on which things could be agreed. He was not used to sitting alone in a room with a check that had been pushed back across a table by a man who hadn't even seemed tempted. He sat there for another 10 minutes. Then he picked up the phone and told the studio that the ending of Unforgiven would not be changing. Unforgiven was released in August 1992. It earned $159 million worldwide. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. It is now considered one of the greatest Westerns ever made and one of the most important American films of the 20th century. Film schools teach it, critics reference it, filmmakers cite it as an influence. And the ending, William Munny riding into the darkness, carrying everything he has done, is cited specifically and repeatedly as the thing that makes the film what it is, the thing that separates it from every other Western, the thing that made it last. Thomas Barrett left Warner Brothers in 1998 and became an independent producer. In a 2010 interview, long after the events of that conference room had become industry legend, he was asked about the negotiation. He thought about it for a long moment before answering. I offered him $20 million, he said. He turned it down without hesitating. And I've spent 20 years being glad he did, because if he'd taken it, there would be no Unforgiven. There would just be another Western with a happy ending that nobody remembers. He paused. That's the thing about Clint Eastwood. He always understood something that the rest of us had to learn the hard way. The films that compromise to please everyone end up pleasing no one. The films that refuse to compromise, those are the ones that last. Here is what the moment in that conference room teaches us. if we are willing to learn it. There will always be someone who arrives with a check and a folder full of data and a carefully prepared argument for why you should change the most important thing about what you are making. The argument will be reasonable. It will be built from real numbers and genuine expertise and the accumulated wisdom of people who have been doing this for a long time and know, based on considerable evidence, what audiences respond to and what they don't. The data will be real. The number will be large enough to make the argument feel serious. And the person making the offer will be genuinely convinced that they are helping you, that they are showing you the path to greater success, greater reach, greater impact, and that only stubbornness or fear is standing between you and those things. They are not wrong about the data. They are wrong about what the data measures. The data measures comfort, approval, the absence of friction. It measures whether people walk out of a theater feeling good. It does not and cannot measure whether people walk out of a theater changed, whether something true was said, whether the film, the book, the painting, the decision, the conversation, whether the thing that was made will still matter in 10 years, in 30, in 100. Clint Eastwood knew the difference. He had spent 40 years learning it on film sets and in editing rooms and in negotiations, exactly like this one, through films that worked and films that didn't, through the slow accumulation of understanding about what the work was actually for and what it was not for, and what happened to work that lost sight of the difference. And in that conference room in Burbank in the spring of 1992, with $20 million on the table and 40 pages of data making the case for compromise, he applied everything he had learned. He pushed the check back. He walked out of the conference room and went back to the editing suite and finished the film he believed in. The ending stayed exactly as he had always intended it to stay. William Munny rode into the darkness. No resolution, no peace, no comfortable final frame, just the truth. And 30 years later, the ending that tested badly with focus groups is the reason Unforgiven is still watched, still taught, still referenced, still true. That is the only measure that has ever mattered. If this story moved you, subscribe, hit the like button, and share it with someone who has ever been offered a very good reason to compromise the most important thing about what they are making. Someone who needs to hear that the check can always be returned, that the ending can always be kept, that the films that last are never the ones that tested well. They are the ones that told the truth.